numbers, it's all right. Good.
Meeting to order. Good morning, everybody. You feel a little bit like a church on Easter or Christmas. It's nice to see everyone here today. Rita, would you do a roll call, please?
Yes. Mr. Doherty.
Here.
Mr. Murphy.
Here.
Mrs. Smith. Here. Mr. Roach.
Here.
Chairman Smith.
Here. Thank you, Rita. You've had a chance before the meeting to have the minutes of the last meeting. Everyone has had a chance to read them. I have one tiny correction where I mentioned that I had a conversation, it says with Rob Lenner, it was really with Ross Curtis instead. That's the only change. Anybody else have any corrections, changes, deletions?
One was called to my attention on page 5. It said that Mr. Grassi and his group was all right with this, and they are not. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Where is that, Rita?
On page 5.
Yeah. So towards the bottom, about
Yeah.
3/4 of the way down?
Yes.
Okay.
So that correction should be
Correct.
made as well.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve with those corrections?
I'll make a motion to approve with those corrections. Second.
Moved and seconded. Rita?
Mr. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Roach? Chairman Smith?
Yes. Thank you. Does anyone on the board have any additions, withdrawals, deferrals, or arrangements to the agenda item? I know there is one, but does any of us have anything? Mr. Dunn, you have a...
Yes, Mr. Chairman, after the application, we're done with the pickleball application, I would like to spend a very short amount of time discussing an item on 3112 Gulfstream Road. That's the house that's under construction at that site. I promise it won't take long.
Okay, so we'll add that as item D under the public hearing. You have in front of you also the future meeting dates, and as always, if any of you aren't going to be here, would you please let Rita know when you can. You see that we have moved the November and December meetings to a little more convenient times than at Thanksgiving and at Christmas. If not, I think we can move to the public hearing part of the meeting. Does anyone have any ex parte communication to disclose? Other than that there was a private meeting on Monday, not a private meeting, there was a meeting on Monday, but we'll discuss some of that later.
Right.
Rita, would you administer the oath to anyone who is going to speak today? So would you please stand.
Anyone that thinks they might want to speak, please stand. Raise your right hand. You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. We're ready for the application for development approval by the Little Club. And we're continuing from meetings that we've previously had, as some of you may or may not know. Our first meeting on this subject was July 25th, and there was a second meeting on September 26th. Mr. Dunham, would you like to comment here before?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. With respect to this item today, I just wanted to kind of bring us up to speed as to how we got here today, and remind everybody that we've actually had two public meetings regarding this application, one on July 25th and one on September 26th. And then this past Monday, we had at the staff level a mediation hearing or meeting. It's not actually a hearing, in which case the staff was here along with all of the participants that have been involved in this, Hillside House, St. Andrews, the applicants, and the staff, and I would say that our meeting on Monday took 2.5 hours, but it was all very useful. Had a lot of good discourse among all of the people that some participated on the phone, and so as a result of that, I'll bring you up to speed where we're at today. The Little Club has agreed to some conditions on if this were to be approved, and those conditions are as follows. The courts will be fenced on the north and east side by an 8-foot fence and 8-foot acoustic-block sound dampening fence material. The court fence on the north and east side will be screened by an 8-foot Volusia hedge. That's at planting. The court surface will be constructed with a Lake Old Masters cushioned surface to dampen sound. The applicant will enter into a declaration of use agreement with the town requiring all players to use certain quiet balls and quiet paddles, restricting hours of play to the hours of 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday, and providing for fines and penalties for violations of these restrictions on the use of the courts. The fine shall be $500 for the first violation, $1,000 for the second violation, $1,500 for the third violation, $2,000 for the fourth violation, and $2,500 for the fifth violation, and all subsequent violations that occur within a 12-month period. On the occurrence and finding of a sixth and all subsequent violations within a 12-month period, approval of the use may be rescinded by the ARPB. Any minor modifications in the approval of landscaping shall be submitted to the town manager for review and approval, and any major modifications shall be brought back to the ARPB for review and approval prior to commencement of landscaping. Other concessions that were made or discussed and agreed upon by the Little Club from our Monday meeting are included in the amended application. One example is an addition of 4 more shade trees to the original landscape plan that you have, so that's just an example, but those will all be covered by Mr. Donahue in his presentation, correct?
Correct.
So,
Thank you, Greg.
yes, sir.
All right, you're up, Mr. Donahue.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thanks for having me here again. I'm Brian Donahue with Insight Studio on behalf of the Little Club. I'd like to start with a quick correction. Mr. Dunn stated that it was an 8-foot fence was a condition of approval. We actually agreed to a 10-foot fence on the north and east side.
Yeah, we weren't sure if the material came in 10-foot sheets or 8-foot sheets.
Right.
And so I think we originally discussed 10-foot, but kind of left it open.
It was open-ended, but I just wanted to
Okay,
make that
thank you.
clear. Okay.
All right.
I'll get started. And As you're all aware, I see all familiar faces here. I know new board members are here today, so I won't go through all of the details, but something that we didn't discuss, and I want to point that out straight from the get-go here, is that we are actually moving the courts to the south. So this was a request that came from the Hillside House and also from St. Andrew's Club. So we moved the court 68 feet to the south, and as you'll see in the graphics that we show you, it provides a significant amount more separation from the proposed court location to the Hillside home. But our request, again, 2 pickleball courts. It's level 2 site plan approval. Okay, so as you can see, the courts have been moved to the south. A couple things that are significant to discuss here. First and foremost, and you'll see this in some photos, there's quite a bit of existing vegetation on the Hillside property and on our property. So the large symbol you see just to the east of the courts is actually a very large green buttonwood tree that's already there, providing a significant amount of screening. There's also some palm trees, and there's a large hedge. There's some Perotis palms in there that actually screen it out pretty well. So that combined with the 8 shade trees, which is an increase, we had 4 previously, so now we're going up to 8 shade trees, 8-foot clusia hedge, 10-foot fencing. You know, we feel that the courts will hardly be visible, if at all. Additionally, to the south, we're showing there that there is some existing, you know, vegetation, so we didn't want to encroach too closely on that. So here are some of the existing views, north, south, east, and west. I'll point you to the bottom left corner is the view to the east. You can see the Hillside House there. That's the closest building on the left side of the screen. And then from there, you see the building kind of starts to go away because of all of the existing vegetation that's already there. So those are the Perotis palms I mentioned, the existing hedge. And then you can see the edge of the large green buttonwood tree on the right side of that picture. And then if you go to the top right, looking south, you can see that green buttonwood tree now on the left side of the screen, and you can see all the vegetation that's kind of tucked in that corner. So that south view really is where we're tucking the courts there. It'll be down in that corner of the property. Quick overview, 2 pickleball courts, unobstructed circulation around the courts. We have a small patio seating area. This is the same thing, nothing's really changed here. The one thing that I will point out is that we've increased the landscape buffer, as we already discussed, and the 10-foot fence previously was an 8-foot fence, so we feel like that'll further dampen the sound. And it does have the acoustic block all the way from the ground up to the 10-foot top of fence on the on the north and east side. And the sound mitigation techniques, still working with the same concessions that we provided previously, which is the cushioned surface, the acoustic block fencing, the 8-foot tall. Rita, we just lost the presentation. Oh, it's back.
Wait, no, it's not. You know, it's just a bad cord. I'll just stand and hold it.
Can you click a button for me too?
Yeah.
Actually, on the back one, I believe.
A bad one?
Yes. If you just use the arrows left and right.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, there we go. That's 2, sorry. Also, the Gamma foam quiet ball will be utilized, the sniper quiet paddles, and the trees. And then, as discussed at the previous meeting, we had sound study performed. We did actually do a demonstration where I think it was pretty clear that with the reduced, or the sound dampening paddles and balls, the sound is significantly reduced. It's not the high kind of ping sound from the plastic ball. It's a much more dampened, lower sound. Here's just a quick, so the Gamma ball is the foam ball. This will be required for use. It's the only ball that's going to be allowed. We'll get into that a little further. There's also the sniper quiet paddle. Those will be required for use as well. So a little information on the acoustic block fencing. It will be installed on the inside of the fence. We do have a sample of it actually. It's a fairly thick mat, almost like a rubber mat material that we'd be happy to show you guys. It will be on the north and east side, and based on our research and understanding from the manufacturer, it's said that it should reduce the decibel level by about 10 to 12 decibels, which relates to about a 50% reduction in the sound. that's produced by the pickleball. So the sound study, we talked a lot about this in the last meeting. I know there's a couple faces here that were not at the last meeting, so I will go back through it. The sampling was conducted on the east property line of where the proposed courts would be, so right on the east edge, as close to the location of the courts as possible. There were different mock-ups done between, hitting the ball like a serve, bouncing the ball off the paddle, trying to get different decibel levels and readings. The results concluded ultimately that hitting a pickleball in a mock game produced an average sound of about 50 decibels. So that's your average kind of up and down sound between the play and things happening. And what we concluded from that is it's about the same or lower than what a normal conversation is. So us standing here speaking today is just as loud or louder than what would be heard from playing pickleball. The sound studies on the next page, we can talk about that. And that didn't take into consideration any of the acoustic block or hedging or anything like that we're doing to further lessen the sound. So here's a study. We did attempt to have the sound expert here today. Unfortunately, I think Mr. Leonard went out to 3 different sound consultants and we could not get someone here today. However, based on the data that they provided, what's highlighted there in the light blue on the chart is the different hitting of the ball at different types of hits, I guess, bouncing it off the paddle or hitting it as if you were going to serve the ball. The left column is your average sound that happens, so you're somewhere in the 40 to 50 decibel range there. As you go over, there's different columns that show peaks, so if somebody hit it really hard one time, maybe it peaked up in a higher range, but generally the averages were in that 40 to 50 range. And if you start to compare that to some of the other functions that are taking place out there, as mowing lawn or yard work, the trimmer, the weed eaters, the golf carts that go by, a lot of those sounds are actually much higher than the pickleball. And what we've highlighted at the bottom that we're trying to kind of compare it to is a normal conversation is about as much noise as playing pickleball. The chart on the right just gives you some general, so if you get into the bottom there at 40, that's raindrops. You get into the 60 decibel, that's a clothes dryer or someone talking. Busy traffic's up in the 85 range, so we're somewhere in that 50 average range. The location was also a discussion. There was a lot of talk about potentially moving the courts out into the middle of the golf course where currently the croquet courts exist. That doesn't really work because there's 2 croquet courts that are built there now. It's a social event. Everyone's meant to be there. There's round robin tournaments. Separating that experience wouldn't work. And quite frankly, bringing that experience would probably be more disrupting to the neighbors as there may be 40 or 50 people there at a time conversating and having cocktails and having a good time. So we think that the pickleball will be a less intrusive, less noisy experience there. And then the other thing is that, the location, we've talked a lot about it. We've actually come back and we're proposing to move the courts as far south as we possibly can on our property, which I didn't mention this, but I think previously we were only about 35 feet from the closest building. Now the closest we are to the northwest corner of the hillside home is about 50 feet. And if you go directly to the east, the building kind of staggers. You're almost 80 feet away. I think it was about 78 feet is what I calculated. So we've significantly increased the separation between our courts and the hillside house. And then to St. Andrews to the north, I think we're over 200 feet away. So rules and regulations, this was something that we got into in the last meeting. Conditions of approval and rules and regulations that the club would be willing to commit to. We can run through these. Players must check in at the pro shop during that check-in process, or if they check in online, they have to come in and say they're there. They're going to receive the paddles or the balls. They can certainly bring their own if they have it, but they're only allowed to use the paddles or the balls. Play would be between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and then the hours are limited to 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday. And they can only use the approved equipment. Next slide, please. The conditions of approval are a lot of what we've talked about and what you already see in the application, but the courts are going to be screened on the north and east side by 8-foot clusia hedge, the 10-foot fencing with the acoustic block on the north and east side, the master cushioned surface, which is a rubberized surface that helps dampen the sound of not only the hitting of the balls and bouncing off the ground, but people stepping in the court as well. 8 shade trees will be planted on the east side of the court. Foam quiet ball will be provided by the club and as well as the paddles, and those are the only thing that's allowed to be used. And a question came up of enforcement, and the town came back. We had a meeting on Monday. It was a very good meeting in our opinion. We spent a lot of time talking about different scenarios and how this could actually be enforced. So there was a case study in the town of Palm Beach for, I believe it was a restaurant, where they had entered into a declaration of use agreement with the town to basically have a way to significantly, enforce or reinforce to the neighbors that yes, we're serious about this, and if there are violations, there's ramifications there, and there are things that can be done. So basically what that would be is an agreement between the town and the Little Club. It provides conditions, which we've already talked about, that are specific to when pickleball can be played and how it can be played with the foam balls or with the sniper paddles. And if there are violations, meaning that if a neighbor calls and says, hey, they were playing at 7 o'clock this morning, or, I heard the ping of the loud ball, looked over it, they were using the plastic ball, then they can either call the town or they can call the police department to enforce the violation. So someone would show up, write a report basically stating there was a violation here, and every one of those violations comes with a fine. It's listed there. So the first violation would be $500, up to the fifth violation is $2,500. If after the fifth violation or the sixth violation, then the applicant would have to come back to the ARPB board, and you guys would be given the authority to rescind the approval for the pickleball courts. I think that concludes our presentation. We'll open it up now for discussion.
Can I just ask you a quick question? It's the chart on the sound level results.
Yes.
Can you bounce back to that?
Sure.
Hold that cord. A little further back. There you go. All right, you highlighted in blue in the middle of the chart on the right, and we talked about normal sound, but if you go to the third bar over, you've got peak sound, so that does mean it could be pretty, in peak sounds in pickleball, it could be pretty loud.
It could be,
94,
yes.
90, 96, 97.
Right, and so, I apologize for that.
You'd have low, no sound at all.
Right,
Average
feet
sound.
shuffling, and
that's
you have
peak
somebody
sound.
really hits it real hard for a second, and that would be your peak sound. Now, if you look up at the background noise, so the very top column in the third to the right, you're at the same thing, so 96. So when you're doing a sound study, there may be somebody slam a car door, there may be, a golf cart drive by, or whatever it is. So the background noise has peak sounds at the same level as the pickleball, which also the normal conversation does. So all of these things have these peak sounds that get very high. So looking at the average seems to be the way that decibel levels are calculated and understood. But yes, there would be peak sounds that are much higher than the 50 or 60 decibel range.
Thank you. Do you want to open it up for discussion among the board, or do we want to hear from the public? What's the best order?
You can listen to the public.
Yeah,
and then
let's
based on
listen to anyone who would like to speak from the public. When you come up, would you please, announce your name for us, please, clearly?
Thank you.
You want to speak? Sure. Somebody has to be shot first.
Good morning, thank you for giving us the opportunity. I'm Larry Clemens, I'm the president of Fairways 2, which is the group of 40 units just north of the proposed project. The minutes have already been corrected, but there's 40 units there, and through a survey that I did and responses from the residents there, 100% of them are against the pickleball. Some people will probably speak here as been brought up. Some of my comments are redundant because we've had 2 meetings, and the issue is all about noise and the nuisance value of the project. But most of the people that responded to my survey were complaining about the noise, and then there's the inherent loss of property values, and those points have already been brought up, and don't have to say too much about that. But it all comes down, in the last meeting, you all talked about code sections 66, 368, and 352, which addresses the impact of new tennis courts and or the noise nuisance value imposed on residents adjacent to tennis courts or other recreational activities. And, we've talked about, Mr. Donahue talked about the sound studies here, but they're really not exactly relevant to our properties, and nobody here in the room, I don't think, and I haven't heard from the prior meetings, where there've been professional studies on what the impact's gonna be, and some of the conditions that we discussed on Monday morning in the mediation meeting talked about the various penalties imposed if there was noise for 5 units, but we really haven't just addressed if we build the courts and with all of the stealth paddles and the gamma balls and the flat surfaces and the acoustic block padding and the trees, what constitutes a nuisance to the hillside people? It's not really, other than visual. I think the sound is mitigated quite a bit with those things for the fairways too, but what is potentially the nuisance value to the hillside group when you tried everything? Is there anything that's going to be part of the agreement where they still have the right, or we have the right to say this is too noisy? Because in pickleball we have, I haven't heard the gamma ball yet, other than through the recordings your group has had, but it's a softer thing. But the thing with sound is it's the sharpness of the sound, and not necessarily the level and the conversations associated with the sport. So it could still be a value or a nuisance after that. So, where would the board's position be on that? So I think, one of the things is the hillside group, I think Mrs. Bent's the only one here that I recognize. It's
Mr. Cutler is trying to get on the phone, on the speakerphone, and is unable to.
If Mr. Cutler was on the phone on Monday, we communicated via emails, and Mr. Gallagher, who is also a resident there, has done some email, but there are a lot of residents that haven't been represented here to give their opportunity. Most of our units in Fairways 2 are seasonal, so we have a good turnout here, but there's probably only 7 or 8 of them out of the 40. So really haven't given the communities a chance to address this problem. And I think the Little Club is trying to mitigate it, but I think we need to give possibly more time to see if the sound is going to be a problem going forward and get more input from the residents. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Crimmins mentioned 2 sections of our code that not everyone here has heard these before, and I'll just read them quickly before we have our next public comment. He mentioned 66-352, and paraphrasing it, it says, "Nor shall anything be constructed or maintained that would in any way constitute a nuisance to adjacent property owners, residents, or to the community." And 66-368 reads, "No tennis courts," and I believe that the governing body of this decision is under the tennis court rules.
Correct.
Okay. So no tennis court shall be located, designed, operated, or maintained so as to interfere unduly with the enjoyment of the property rights by owners of property adjoining the tennis courts. Those are the 2 codes that he referenced. Would anyone else like to comment? Yes, please come forward.
A lot of friends and neighbors here this morning. I can just give you an idea of where I live. Photograph from my balcony. I live next door to the Little Club. And this photo looks right down on where that proposal is for the pickleball courts.
Would you please quickly introduce
And my
yourself?
name is Joseph Benoit, and I live at 4475 North Ocean Boulevard, just to the north of Little Club Drive there, across the hedge at St. Andrews. What occurred to me, this has been going on a long while. I'm a member of the Little Club, by the way, and I know that I see a lot of you here. In this proposal, and I'm not suggesting that it is going to be, the end of the world for me, and you see how close I am as I look out of my balcony there. But I really am concerned about the residents at the hillside. They're my neighbors, we're a very close-knit community there. And what affects them does affect us, our quality of living, especially if there's to be changes. Hate to tell you, but I've had a background in real estate, both here and in Massachusetts, and I taught the course on condominiums for 20 years in Massachusetts, and I'm a certified residential broker with the National Association of Realtors, and there's no doubt in my mind whatsoever that what is being proposed here will affect the values of all the units at Hillside. I won't stretch it across the heads to us, and I would say in the value of $50,000 to $200,000 a unit. It occurs to me after hearing this presentation, and I just got back down here last week, so we had a lot of catching up to do, and with all good intentions, my friends at Little Club and fellow members have proposed this, but it's a bad proposal to begin with. And I know we all have to keep an open mind, and I appreciate the board keeping an open mind. But all this type of thing, the sounds, I mean, Mr. Crimmins mentioned, it's not necessarily the volume of the sound. The repetitiveness of the sound is something. You take drop by drop by drop by drop, or the incessant, whacking of a ball continually from 8 in the morning till 8 at night. And even though it's the volume of a conversation that we're having there, it's still something that would be very disturbing when it's that close to these people. And I've had a chance to talk with Tom Cutler, who's really on the other side. He's very concerned about this, and he's the one that asked for an extension for a month or two, so that people can, get together and see if they could do something. I don't even know that that's worth it, to tell you the truth. Mrs. Bent and her husband I spoke with yesterday. They're very concerned. It's a tough time for them to have their child who's just been operated on. And then Mr. Gallagher called me at 9:30 last night because I had reached out to him the day before, and he had just come back from an ordeal with his automobile, but he definitely is very much against this, because especially with the movement in the court, it moves it closer to him. Somebody at the Little Club told me yesterday, well, Mr. Gallagher is all set with regard to this and so forth. I noticed this morning in the minutes we had to, ask for a vote to change that the St. Andrews people were in the temporary draft minutes, were called forward to be in favor of this. So I think that it's very much part of an interest to us. It affects us when these people at Hillside are going to be so affected by this. That's our community. It's tight-knit. I know almost all the people there over the years. I've been a member of the Little Club for 17 years. So I just ask the board to please take these things into consideration as you keep an open mind to this. There's always two sides to a story. This is developing quickly. I'd say a lot has happened since the meeting on Monday with regard to this, because it's kind of awakened some of the people at Hillside particularly, as well as many of the people here that are here. So I hope that some of that's helpful to you. Thank you very much.
Morning. My name is Jan Fisher. I'm also a resident of St. Andrews, right across from your open lot where the proposed courts are. I just have 3 quick comments. One, hearing about your fines and the nuisance. It sounds like the Little Club isn't going to be responsible for monitoring that it's only if the neighbors call the police or the town hall, that they're the ones that are responsible for saying it's a nuisance or not. It seems like the Little Club should have the responsibility. Secondly, if I've talked to some experienced pickleball players, and when you mention a rubber ball to them, they have no interest. That's a practice ball. That is not like, it's like hitting a golf ball that only goes 50 feet instead of the normal whatever to mitigate on a driving range. So the fact that unless you have all inexperienced pickleball players and they're gonna accept this, I find that difficult to believe. And also the fact that it's up to the Hillside House to call on the nuisance all the time. My third comment is to each of you as the board. I don't know what your mission is as the architectural and planning board here in Gulfstream. Is it to protect the residents that live in your community? Or is it to promote the popularity of another activity at the Little Club? The Little Club is very popular right now. They're having a wonderful time with their members. I'm not sure that this is an absolute necessity, nor will it hurt their popularity. So my question to each of you, I don't want you to answer it out loud to me, but it will be interesting. If this same proposal was given and was presented, and you were the neighbor living right next to the proposed pickleball courts, would you still vote yes, saying that, oh, it's fine with the rubber balls? If in your heart of hearts, and it was your property, and you know that you would vote no, then that should be your vote today. Thank you.
Next, anyone else? Sure. Good morning.
My name is Sophie Band. Apologize for my voice, just coming back. I know Mr. Cutler is trying to get on the phone and he wasn't able to. I don't know if any of you is aware of that. I was at the meeting for mediation on Monday. As I said and repeated, I am only one of the property owners of the Hillside House. I am very appreciative of their efforts to try to make it as, I'm not quite sure how to say, noiseless as possible, and to try to do whatever they can to make this happen, and to do all the acoustic fence and the padding and the boards and everything else. And moving those courts to the south definitely increased the distance between the courts and the building. But you just said that it was putting the courts 50 feet to the closest building at Hillside House. The St. Andrews tennis courts are 60 feet away, and when they were built, had to be 60 feet away. I feel we're dealing with a lot of uncertainties. We're not quite sure really how loud it's going to be, how all of the acoustic fence and everything is really going to help. We don't really know how much of a disturbance it's going to be. We don't really know, depending on the disturbance, if it's really going to change the value of our properties. But if it is a disturbance, it will certainly affect the value of our properties. And I think there's a statute in the town of Gulfstream of not to change, do any changes in Gulfstream that would affect property values. So I know some of our residents are really, really concerned, especially now that the court's house is bringing it a little closer to them. They're not here today, but they're completely against it. So Little Club is really changing the nature of their operation. They go from a quiet golf course to wanting to be a racket club. And I think, you know, this really affects the neighbors. And I'm one of the neighbors. That's all I think I have to say.
Thank you, Sophie. Anyone else like to speak? Sure.
Good morning. Tony Graziano, also a resident of Fairways 2 Condominium Association at St. Andrews. I wrote a letter to the ARPB, I guess it was a month ago, 6 weeks ago, and I would like to compliment the Little Club in addressing just about all of the issues that I raised. But they were selfish issues dealing with Fairways 2, not Hillside House. There are 2 rackets facilities in the town right now, St. Andrews and the B&T. Never in the history of this town have you allowed a rackets facility within 20 feet of a property line. 60 feet is the closest, that's St. Andrews. The B&T, although one of its neighbors is here, is much more than 60 feet from the property line. You're now reducing, if you allow this, you are reducing the allowable setback to 20 feet from the property line for a rackets facility. Is that precedent going to be applied to St. Andrews and the B&T? Could they expand their tennis facilities or put in pickleball within 20 feet of their neighbors? I'd like to ask the neighbors here, would you like to see a pickleball court at the B&T within 20 feet of your property line? And I bet the answer is going to be no.
Hi, I'm John Burns. I live up top of County Road, and the tennis courts in St. Andrews are right next door. They are within 10 feet of my property line. I knew it when I bought it. I live in a cement house. The noise level is not intrusive at this point. Of course, if tennis picks up or it's early in the morning, yes, I hear a little bit of it. It's also closer. It's not 60 feet from the condos that were built across the street. Most of the houses, you have to go down about 3 houses to get 60 feet variance at the top of the street of St. Andrews Court. I'm not here to pick a fight, I just wanted to clear the record.
Anyone else? Anyone like to speak in the Little Club? No? Okay, then let's open it up for discussion on the board of the committee. Curtis, you have any comments?
Well, with regard to what the remedies could be, if in fact this does become a, and frankly, nobody knows until the courts are established what the sound is, in fact, it'd be like, but the Little Club has made serious overtures to try to mitigate them. And in the chart with the town, it says that if there is a lot of disturbance, the ARPB can close the court down. So, I mean, I think that I think that the meeting that was held on Monday tries very hard with the establishment of penalties, which I think are quite severe. And, especially if you get up to the 5 penalty level, that's very severe. But I also think that the Little Club has made great strides in trying to answer questions which some of the neighbors really, well, none of us know the answer to because of the decibel, just understanding decibel levels alone is quite challenging. But, and the Little Club is within their rights to put it there. So, that's my only observation. That
Yeah, I tend to agree. I thought we were coming together on the issue, and I was hopeful that it was going to come to that. It doesn't seem like it's there. I think the Little Club has gone bent over backwards and just made all sorts of concessions to try to get some agreement. And in fact, I wasn't aware of moving it under 70 feet, 68 feet to the south. I think is quite a concession. All the plannings and the hours of play and the ball. I don't mean that there's a pickleball, quite frankly. I don't even know what it is, but the soft balls and the paddles and the soft surface and so all the spines and everything. I just still think that the Little Club has some, you know, rights here. They have an interest that they have some ability to put this court together. I don't know the technical terms and nuisance and all this type of stuff, and threats about home values decreasing because of these. I'm just trying to be a common sense person, and I thought we were kind of trying to bridge a gap here. And I don't really see it. I just see no or yes, a binary decision. I don't see anybody kind of trying to, you know, say, hey, well, okay, we'll agree to it with all these things.
I think one of the biggest problem is that the property owners at the Hillside House were not able to come to this mediation meeting. And you know, being done during the season where nobody is in residence makes it very difficult to bring people together. As I said at the meeting, I'm only one of the property owners. There's 10 others that are just not,
Can I ask a question?
were not present.
Excuse me. The meeting on the 21st, do people have options to call in this week?
On Monday?
Yes, sorry.
That was a request of actually the St. Andrews Club that set up the, because they had some members, Mr. Grassi is not here. But they set up, there's a process that you set up that they dial in and then they have to put a code in. And so they ask us to do that, but nobody had set up that kind of a process for today's meeting.
No, not for today, for Mondays, I was talking about it.
Right.
Because obviously, you know, there's been a lot of progress since our last meeting, or moves to try.
So there was to answer your question, there was an opportunity, yes, to call in.
Okay.
Mayor, Mr. Grassi is not here today. He, the manager of the St. Andrews Club, set up that ability for a conference link-up, but I'm not sure that the people in the Hillside House had full awareness of that.
But we had people from the Hillside House that called in.
Only Mr. Cutler because he was contacted directly
Yeah,
as a
well, see,
member of St. Andrews.
Mr. Cutler is a member of St. Andrews, and so he got walked in, but I don't think any of the other members of the or residents of Hillside House knew about it.
We do have an email that was put in front of us this morning from another member of the Hillside House, Mr. Gallagher, is that correct?
Mr. Gallagher and,
Do we need to read that into, or has everybody here had a chance to read Mr. Gallagher's?
I read it, yes.
Okay. We don't need to read it into the minutes, but we certainly want to recognize that he's written in opposition.
Can I ask the question?
Certainly.
Somewhere in here I read that Little Club is responsible for policing and also it's not just the neighbors.
Yes.
Can somebody speak to that?
Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to speak to that.
Sure, Roz.
My name is Roz Curtis. I'm the current president of the Little Club. I thought we had a great session hosted by Mr. Dunham on Monday. In all honesty, I thought the purpose of that session was to try to, for the Little Club, to try to reach accommodation with the neighbors to mitigate their concerns. And I frankly thought, walking out, that that's what we had done. And I think we've been through the list of things that we agreed to do, which our board voted on unanimously the next day to accept all of those conditions, including moving the courts and all the things that have been stated. What, to your question, that is not clear or not written, but what was discussed at our board meeting is the Little Club does not obviously want any of our members to incur fines or to create problems or violate the rules for the neighbors. So in fact, we discussed internally quite a few enforcement mechanisms, which would include, we have golf staff who come before the opening of the hours we agreed to for pickleball and are there afterwards. So we discussed using the golf staff for enforcement. We discussed actually putting a lock on the gate into the courts to prevent our members from mistakenly going onto the courts when they're not supposed to be there. We have discussed posting signage very visibly to remind our members of all of the conditions that we've agreed to make sure that we've met the requirements that we discussed in the mediation on Monday. And we have also discussed mounting a camera on our cart barn, which would have visibility to the courts, so that we would have and understand proactively the usage of the court, and if there was a problem, where the problem was coming from, so we could address it. So I think, truthfully, although I think it's a great question because it wasn't publicly discussed, but those are some of the things that the Little Club has discussed internally to help make sure that we comply with the conditions that we agreed to on Monday.
Right. Any other comments? Georgette, you okay? Malcolm, any questions?
Georgette, just the same point about how it's going to be basically enforced oversight. I think one of the things that appears to me is that, yes, like all planning applications, no one knows what the end product is. We can have all this oversight, you know, guessing and looking into the future, and we use the tools of code and feedback from residents to make that decision. In this instance, I think it's the Little Club shown that you've attempted to address every variable that at this point we can. I would say my concern is that if there is an issue, it shuts down. I know that sounds great, you have a significant capital investment to make, but it's the fact that we've used our best scientific tools to look at this, common sense management, but the point that the lady who said it was next door to me, if I could see that the code was followed and all avenues have been explored to mitigate before it happened what potentially could happen, and that's the thing, potentially, none of us, and courtesy point, none of us can tell you exactly what that is in terms of decibels, but if you're living next to it and we've attempted to make it, and then the reality is, guess what, you can't hear yourself speak or whatever, and the best efforts that have been put together in the document you talked about, Greg, you know, you've addressed every point you can, hours of use, sound, the enforcement you just explained, I mean the cameras just come up to the point, your best efforts, if they don't work, that's probably the only area that I would actually say to ensure, to try and give the feedback we've had. Is there the possibility that if all the enforcement efforts, all the noise projections make it basically not, you know, desirable to live next to, and it does everything that the naysayers predict, have we the possibility to shut it down?
Well, of course, I mean, the enforcement process, this is an agreement, what's the name of it? Declaration of Use Agreement between the town and the Little Club, and the enforcement process always comes back to the ARPB. And so we, as everybody knows, we've established that process. I think your question is that after a year, it appears as if, you know, we've had 10 to 15 complaints. And again, there is a lot of self-enforcement from the Little Club, because I think it's incumbent upon them to keep the complaints down. And so, you know, if you have people out there playing at 7:30 in the morning, it's incumbent on them to, you know, to keep people from calling in. And so you need your own personnel, as we discussed, would be, you know, primarily responsible for self-enforcing. But I think your question is there an opportunity to rethink this, basically, is what you're saying?
In any feedback we get when the theory which we're addressing here becomes the reality. That's really the question.
You know, I mean, I've never addressed that kind of a situation before, so.
It's a theoretical question.
It is.
All the efforts you've made to mitigate and address it may absolutely work as planned, and the residents may be pleasantly surprised. But it's just, what is our backstop?
Well, let me answer it. In this motion to approve that's written up, it says, on the occurrence and finding of a sixth and all subsequent violations within a 12-month period, approval of the use may be rescinded by the ARPB.
That's correct.
That says that if there's 5 violations on.
No.
That's not.
No,
Well,
no. Excuse me, I don't
what
want
I'm
to put, I don't want to put words in Mr. Murphy's mouth, but he's not talking about a violation of the time of use or the use of the paddles. He's saying, what if the Little Club does everything it has promised to do, and the noise is so obnoxious that it doesn't fit within that nice gray or blue little frame, and the neighbors are really being disturbed, even though the Little Club has done everything it's supposed to do. Is there a way for the ARPB or the neighbors to shut them down?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Ross?
I believe we have a proxy for this situation. It exists on the other side of the hillside house. It's the St. Andrews tennis courts. There's no screening, there's no sound baffling, and I'm not hearing anybody who's a neighbor there saying that we should shut the St. Andrews tennis courts down.
But we're talking about tennis courts and not pickleball courts.
So what Mr. Curtis is saying is that there is nothing you can do, because even if it disturbs them, if they've done all the things that they're agreeing to do, that even if it's a disturbance, so that they should be quiet, because they're tolerating that on the other side, which of course is a very different situation, the tennis courts versus this pickleball court.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Stephen Laporte, and I'm a past president of the Little Club. And as some of you might know, I'm a certified tennis professional, but I'm also a certified pickleball instructor. And the whole purpose of our pickleball at the Little Club is for recreational purposes for multi-generational families. We're not looking to make this a pickleball association playing against Delray Beach Tennis Center or something like that, where it's an official pickleball league or anything like that. We're doing this for the families and for the future families of the Little Club, just to grow pickleball and maybe introduce them to tennis this way and to grow it this way. Now, one of the things that, I don't know if you might be aware of, but pickleball is evolving and changing a lot right now. It's also called spec tennis. Spec tennis is called specialized tennis, and they're going with quieter balls. For instance, we have the rubberized ball, but they're experimenting with quieter balls, quieter paddles, because this happens in every single community all across the United States, because of the noise factor, and everyone is so scared about this noise factor. So the Pickleball Association is evolving all the time right now. So what I'm saying is, I can't promise you anything. I don't know what's going to happen in the future of pickleball, but I know it's going to be a lot quieter, and things probably in a year's time is going to be quite remarkable about what they're going to come up with. So again, our purpose was not to have that loud pickleball, and we're all cognizant of that. We don't want that noise, and we're trying everything we can to make it really, really quiet, and for the members of the club to enjoy a recreational sport in a small court area, and we will try anything and do anything we can to whatever the Pickleball Association is doing to make it quiet. So I just want to present that. So there's all these different forms now of pickleball, specialized tennis, and it's evolving all the time, and we will keep on top of that. So I just want to present that to you. Thank you.
Just want to follow up on Mr. Murphy's comment, because I made him in my presentation, I think we all appreciate what the Little Club's trying to do to mitigate everything, but if it still becomes a nuisance to the neighbors, what process do the neighbors have with the ARPB, even if they're using the gamma ball and everything? So I think you raised a good point, Mr. Murphy.
Within, just to set forth what's in the Declaration of Use, the town reserves its right to enforce its code of ordinances. So it's not just we approve it and then we can't do anything because it's been approved. It's still, the town code would still apply, including the nuisance section and what have you.
Including closing it down?
There would be fines, and certainly part of that would be, I imagine, having some sort of meeting where we consider adjusting whatever issue is causing this nuisance. I mean, if we have a code enforcement hearing and and a special magistrate used to sort of go down that path, finds that there is a nuisance based on a certain activity, they would be prohibited from continuing to use it in that way that causes the nuisance.
I'm really wrestling with this because I don't think that the club, I think the Little Club has done everything it could possibly do and then some to try to sort of accommodate the neighbors. And I really commend you highly for this. It's quite remarkable that you've moved it, raised it, heightened it, changed balls, whatever. So I don't think we can ask you to do more. I don't know really what that could be, other than you agree to let us close you down the first week you're open if we don't like the sound. I wouldn't recommend you do that. But what I'm fighting with here is it's been mentioned by a number of people here, is that we're here really to protect the residents and the citizens of the town and the code. And I read them earlier. When you read the overriding rules and code that governs us, we're here to protect the people. And to me, almost if one resident doesn't want it, we should say we're not going to do it. But I don't think it's one resident. I think we find that there's a whole group of people at St. Andrews, and most of the people at the Hillside, condominium complex are opposed to it. There's a few that were in favor of it, if I'm not mistaken, at the Hillside House. And so it puts us in a very, very awkward position that we have members on the committee here that are members of the Little Club. Half the people in the room are members of the Little Club and also live in one of these residences. I don't know really what the solution is. I guess we can go ahead and try to put it to vote if someone wants to make a nomination. I personally, this is just me speaking, I don't think delaying it another month or another 2 months is going to make any difference. Maybe Mrs. Bent could say that you said that not everyone isn't here, but are there going to be people from the Hillside House that come that are opposed to it? Because we know most of them are. Are there people coming that would be in favor of it that don't have a right?
Most of them, apart from Mrs. Stanley, are against it.
Okay, and am I right that from the St. Andrews Club, speaking on behalf of the 40 units, they're primarily opposed to it? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
What you've got to, I'm sorry if I can just say something, is that right now the majority of the Hillside House comes in the winter, enjoy their patio, and they've got no noise at all. So how much is going to be a nuisance is, as you say, we don't know. But the repetitiveness of the noise is definitely going to be a factor. How much those courts are going to be in use, we don't know. They're just, but what I know is that they didn't purchase at the Hillside to hear a noise. They bought at the Hillside because of the quietness of the place.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to clear one thing up, is that this is a process that's now going on 4 months. When this first started, the town sent out notices to, as required by the codes, through the clerk's office, to the residents surrounding the application. We do that for every application in town, and we have received, as you know, because you've seen the copies of emails and letters from people that somehow got the notice. And so either through, the management of the Hillside or St. Andrews, but we have gotten, numerous letters and emails that addressed it. So it's not like the information, we've done as best we can to get a hold of people. Again, going on for 4 months, so maybe some of them are harder to get a hold of. I'm not sure.
So, do we, as a committee, have a feel for what the residents surrounding it feel like? Okay. Is there any other comments from the public? Not anybody from staff or city manager, Trey?
I just want to make another, I thought Malcolm was heading down a direction that I liked, this whole idea of it becoming a general nuisance. Because I agree with that. If this thing was some ridiculous noise emitting, it is a nuisance, I would like to be able to shut it down. And to the detriment of the Little Club and their loss of their capital investment, I just don't know. Because if I was living next door and that thing was really overpainted, I would want to have the authority to shut it down. And I think everybody in this room probably wants that authority. So I'm wondering if we should explore that further to can be put in this declaration of use, some triggering overall nuisance that, no, we're gonna shut this thing down. There's a probationary period of 18 months and we're gonna see how it works, or something like that. I'm offering this as maybe a solution, possibly, so that it might be able to get built, but then there's a good chance this thing could be, taken out if it was determined to be really a nuisance. Not that somebody broke 2 violations, but if it was, that, maybe it's not practical, but I think if it truly was a nuisance, I wouldn't want it next to my property. I don't think it would be. I don't think it, as it's envisioned, but who really knows?
Bob, I think that you just said, as it's envisioned, no, you couldn't have done any more. You've addressed every point and point that was made. All the personal points that were addressed. We're all staring into the future, and we've used every tool we can to try and mitigate the perceived and recognised problems and the feedback from neighbours and the technical side. But if the decision goes forward to approve this, it shouldn't be that people living close by go, that's it, it's a done deal, I'm stuck with this forever. That's my feeling, because we're all staring into the future. This is our best guess.
But what's the definition of nuisance? What's nuisance to me?
Is there a criteria?
Yeah, that's right.
So
Who determines that?
Yeah,
Right.
and that's
I mean,
what-
there's some, I'm sorry, I think there's some major legal challenges, right, with that type of approach. I understand what you're saying, and this was really my point. No one's come to you to complain and have a desire to shut down the tennis courts, which are directly on the other side with no sound baffling and no screening, okay? So that's really my point, is with all the things we're doing, okay, I would hope and I would ask that the board would, after this time and everything we've done in our mediation meeting and everything we've done, that we would get to the point where we could take a vote. But I think we have a proxy that would suggest that, given everything we're doing, that this can work, because there's been no efforts from the neighbors on Hillside House to shut down the tennis courts, or no complaints to the board towards that effect. One other just point that wasn't made about moving south. One of the laws of sounds is that for every doubling of the distance, the decibels go down by 6. So when we went from 25 feet to now we're, I think Brian, you said 50, right, is the closest. We actually lowered by 6 decibels what sound people will hear. And all of those numbers were done without calculating the 10 to 12 decibel reduction from the sound baffling. So if you start at 50, pick a number, you're now doubling, you're coming down to 44. Now you're taking another 10 off for the baffling, we're down to 34, okay? So to some degree, I think the board could take comfort that the movement, which was requested by St. Andrews and Hillside House, which we agreed to do on Monday, plus the other techniques that we've agreed to, including increasing the height of the fence to 10 feet and increasing the acoustic block, are all meant to address the potential issue. But I understand the comments made by Mr. Murphy and Mr. Docker. I think it would be very challenging legally, and then, how do you get into the diminution of the rights, property rights and values of the Little Club as well?
Okay. No, Aaron, it's absolutely, how do we measure it?
Right.
Yeah. The theory is great, but, and that's why we have these meetings, because of the discussion. But again, the steps you've taken to mitigate these perceived challenges and the feedback you had, you couldn't do more. Well, I don't think, than what's been presented.
I agree.
Just a quick comment. I'm Sophie Ayers, and also a resident of St. Andrews. So I just want to pick up on something that Stefan said, who I've known for quite some time. The reason that the game of pickleball seems to be changing so rapidly, which is fantastic, is because when it came on the scene, it's very popular. It is one of the noisiest sports that's been introduced in a long time. And So the game is changing really quickly because I think the game and its advocates realize that it has to. It can't be compared to tennis. St. Andrews courts were played hard through, and the sound that's generated from a tennis ball is very different from the sound that's generated from a pickleball. So I think it's great that the game is changing and making a huge effort to get quieter. But the country overall is facing exactly what Mr. Murphy has mentioned, which is lawsuits and litigation over nuisance. People are getting headaches and stuff like that. I'm sure that's all going to change because noise mitigation is getting so good. I guess I'm a little disappointed that we don't have sound engineers that we're really hearing from. So to me, you know, my mom lived and was a member of the Little Club, and I love the Little Club. And I don't think the Little Club could be doing any more than they're doing to help with this situation. It's really sort of about the game, and the game itself, as it's currently configured, has created a lot of problems nationwide. And I appreciate all you're doing to think through this.
The tennis comment is important, but not important. There are two tennis facilities in town, as you mentioned earlier. Susan and I live very close to one of them. But when we bought there, it was there, and we knew it was there. And I think most of the people that bought in the Little Club, or no, the Hillside House, knew that the tennis was there when they bought there, but they didn't know it was pickleball. It was going to be built next door. And so I don't think it's really fair to compare that, the noise issue, but particularly it wasn't there when they bought the unit. And I'm wondering now, if you were living in a Hillside House, would you want to buy one of those units that overlook the pickleball court? I don't know. But generally, when you move to an area, you know what's next to you, and I think that most people perceive the Little Club to be a fantastic golf community course and club. And it is that. It's just a spectacular facility, and now it's reaching out to do some new things. And so I do think we have to be really conscious. I don't think we should ask them to say, if we decide that we don't like it a week after it's done, that they're going to say, okay, we'll close it down. We can't put them in that position. Are we ready to, somebody ready to make a motion to approve or not approve, or at that point, it's either that or delay, but what can we do?
I think we should get to I mean, we've had 3 meetings on this, and plus auxiliary meetings on Monday and things. I think it should be put to a vote.
Just before we do that, I just looked at the declaration again of use and trade. It was on page 5, just from a legal perspective. And I know the point of, you know, we go into a legal minefield, whatever. Can I just have, we just get some feedback on what that would mean in reality, please? In terms of the violations that end up going to the circuit court in Palm Beach County. Can you put that into sort of a potential route, what would happen, what that scenario looks like in reality?
Well, with the appeals that you're talking about, it's just like any decision that the ARPB or commission would make, that first, whoever the applicant is, if it's a denial, would have the right to appeal to the Board of Adjustment, which the town commission sits at the Board of Adjustment to hear any appeals. So, just talking about the fine, say the first fine is $500, for some reason they want to appeal that, they'd appeal that to the town commission, which would be sitting as the Board of Adjustment, to take in the evidence of the violation, whether it's hours or use of balls or rackets that aren't permitted or what have you. And then that would be appealed to the state court system. Again, it's just over the fine amount. It wouldn't be about any use within the document. That was just providing an avenue of appeal for the fines.
Nothing to do with the part where it says, you know, we can, as it go to the ordinance, we have the right to,
so within those, you are permitted upon the 6th violation to rescind the use. Of course, you may, you're not forced to. You can impose additional conditions if the hours are too late. If something is found to not work, you can put additional conditions through that. And then again, those would also be appealable to the Board of Adjustment if they weren't the Little Club did not like that determination.
Thank you.
You're saying down the road if they wanted, we wanted to change the times or dates or.
If there were, you could do that upon finding of, a sixth violation. Right, now if you wanted to move that to the third violation or fifth violation or second violation, you could. Again, this is all just giving you the opportunity to consider the conditions and, of use.
So we would be approving today the declaration of use agreement.
You would be approving that in principle. It needs to be approved by the town commission.
And also by the Little Club, and you'd also approve it.
That's right, and I believe they have reviewed it and have agreed to it as it's written, with just a minor addition confirming that the violations are those specifically enumerated in Article 3. So they want Article 5 regarding the penalties to specifically refer to Article 3.
So just to clarify, if this went forward as presented, does the commission have the right to amend this? We don't, what you're saying is they have the final say on the declaration of use.
That's correct.
And of course, that's an open meeting.
That's right.
And there could be presentations for the content of the declaration.
Certainly.
If you're talking about the town commission, that would be a scenario where it's being taken to them as the board of adjustment, correct?
No, this is just to approve the
Oh,
concept.
This is prior to,
Yeah,
this
that's
is,
right.
this is essentially, there's a process.
Right.
Let's say this is planning, nuts and bolts, the science part, the actual oversight.
You
part.
are the final
Arbiter.
arbiter of this level 2 application. However, you cannot legally bind the town with the declaration of use. So the town commission would have to be the one that
And at that meeting,
authorizes that.
if anyone wants to come along and
That
make a
is,
suggestion in terms and conditions of this declaration of use,
that is right. They would not be able to re-argue anything that you decided here,
but in terms
but
of
they would be able to,
argue the content of this.
that's right. It should be more restrictive, less restrictive, or earlier ability to determine or rescind the usage.
And when's the next commission meeting?
November 8th.
By which time more people will be back in town? I presume. That's just a presumption.
Yeah.
Okay.
But again, that would just be as to the declaration of use, not anything else.
Right.
Not the land use approval that's before you right now.
No, that's our responsibility as a level 2
Yes, sir.
consideration. The declaration of how to use that is not.
Okay, any other further comments or questions? Does anybody want to come forth with a motion?
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve a permit for the removal of an existing 48-foot diameter green buttonwood tree from the construction area. That has to be approved, I guess, before the pickleball motion, but.
So you need a second.
Oh, a second.
Second.
Rita?
Wasn't that
Mr.
true?
Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Roach?
Yes.
Chairman Smith?
Yes.
And I will make a further motion to approve a level 2 architectural site plan based on the finding that the construction of 2 pickleball courts with a spectator area west of the existing Hillside House condominiums meets the minimum intent of the design manual and applicable review standards with the following conditions. 1, the courts will be fenced on the north and east side by a 10-foot
Correct.
fence and 10-foot Acoustablock sound dampening fence material. The court fence on the north and east side will be screened by an 8-foot Kalusha hedge. 3, the court surface will be constructed with a Lake-Hold Masters cushioned surface to dampen sound. 4, the the applicant will enter into a declaration of use agreement with the town requiring all players to use certain quiet balls and quiet paddles, restricting hours of play to the hours of 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday, and providing for fines and penalties for violations of these restrictions on the use of the courts. The fines shall be $500 for the first violation, $1,000 for the second violation, $1,500 for the third violation, $2,000 for the fourth violation, and $2,500 for the fifth and all subsequent violations that occur within a 12-month period. On the occurrence and finding of a sixth and all subsequent violations within a 12-month period, approval of the use may be rescinded. And 5, any minor modification in the approved landscaping shall be submitted to the town manager for review and approval, and any major modification shall be brought back to the ARPB for review and approval prior to commencement of landscaping.
I would second.
I would just also like to add that the, number 4, the declaration of use agreement is subject to approval and modification by the town commission.
And the, and 6, that the declaration of use agreement, which is submitted between the town and the Little Club, is subject to modification by the town commission.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Any comments or questions? Not Rita?
Mr. Dougherty?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Roach?
Yes.
Chairman Smith?
No. So it carries. Our note with Greg and Trey Hughes for our next steps, they now have permission to go forward with it. Correct?
Right.
And November 7th,
They can't put it forward until.
yeah, until this has been agreed. So, it's important to address that, Roz, at the meeting on the 7th. Okay?
It's actually on the 8th.
8th, I'm sorry.
And can I make a request that we've already said, I know that the outreach to the residents, we make sure that that's absolutely there. And if anybody isn't available to be there in person, that they have the opportunity to dial into the conference.
We don't have the ability.
We don't have the
to set up
ability.
a conference. But they can.
Apple have an amazing thing for, and I think if people know we can conference people in, to tell them to try and assist, and we can participate. That would be, to make our best efforts.
Okay, I think that concludes
I
that.
believe you have the one issue that.
Oh, yes, we have another issue, as a committee, we have another issue to address, but I think that concludes is a little of request.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay,
Let's go to Secretary.
Stephanie, I think that's close.
It is close, thank you. Take it out.
Hey, I'm Scarlett. I see him.
We have an addition, it'll be item D, and it has to do with the residents being constructed at 3112 Gulf Stream, and Mr. Dunham will.
Yes, so this is again, already under construction, and the staff is requesting that the ARPB make it a condition of approval. I mean, after it's already been approved, but amending that approval to require a green construction fencing around it. Now, at times during the day, they may take panels down so that they can get the vehicles on site, which they're required to do, the construction vehicles on site. But after cleanup and when they leave at 5 o'clock, it needs to have a construction fencing around it. So that's what we're requesting.
We don't have one now, we're gonna ask.
They do have one up there, but they want to take it down because it's not been made a condition of the approval. But I want to make it a condition of the approval.
Remember, it's a lot with a kind of a pool house, guest house on the corner.
It's
They call it the Catholic.
the
Cal Malice building, it's Rusty Coopy designed it.
And let me.
There probably isn't a lot of room to put vehicles.
There's not, and so they're at the stage now where they have a lot of different trades there. And I think each person that's coming to work there is driving a separate car. And so we're having issues with that, so I'm not, it's a good construction site, they keep it clean. Mountain Associates is, you know, and they're doing a good job, we just need this green construction fencing. And we've done that before, Mr. Cacioppo's houses down on
Polo.
On Polo. And many contractors put that up just a matter of course.
Okay,
Having pushed that through, just
so I just need a motion to.
can I make a motion that we approve the
Require.
recommendation made by the town manager to require the stipulation read the green fencing around construction site?
That's good.
Second.
Moved and seconded, Rita?
Mr. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Roach?
Yes.
Chairman Smith?
Yes. Any other items by staff? Any items by the board members? No? Public is off. City councilwoman from the north. We're adjourned.
Thank you, Tom.